Hey guys, looks like I'm live, and so I'm just going to look at whether the name of God is Jehovah or Yahweh. Now, I believe the name of God is Jehovah, and so I wrote a book about Revelation 16:5 a few years ago, and in that book I touch on these concepts. I have a chapter about that, and so I'm just going to skim through that chapter, and I believe that once you know the basics of this argument, you can't really get around the fact that Jehovah is the name of God and that Yahweh is actually the name of Jupiter, a pagan god. Now, I know a lot of people who follow me on Facebook or have read my articles on Easter. They know that I tend to stay away from, pagan roots type of things. I usually am disproving the whole concept that Easter is a pagan festival. And, the whole pagan roots thing, there's some goddess who has this name Easter, and so we celebrate some sex festival when we have Easter. That's just a whole bunch of baloney. It's a whole bunch of rubbish. And, for the last... Okay, it says reconnection successful, so I'll just jump back to where I was. Sorry about that. This is the first time I've used this technology, so usually I'm on Facebook. So, there is a God called Yahweh that people are calling upon. And where does this name come from? Most people think it's just from the Hebrew Bible. It's Yah and Yahweh. But I'm going to show you conclusively that Yahweh is Jupiter, and that Jehovah is the proper name of God. And so many times people call it the Tetragrammaton. So Tetragrammaton, I'll actually just read through what I've got written here instead of me trying to explain it and then read through, and I've already said it anyway, because I do touch on pretty much everything in this book. And so that's a nice little picture there of the King James Version with the Tetragrammaton up the top. So that's what the Tetragrammaton is. It's basically the four letters of the name of God. And so some people feel that the vowels of Adonai were put onto there, but we're going to look at that as well. So firstly, the key to understanding the issues surrounding Revelation 16:5 involves a basic understanding of the Tetragrammaton and its importance. The word Tetragrammaton is transliterated for us English speakers from the Greek, which simply means four letters. And the Hebrew theonym Jehovah, which is commonly transliterated into Latin letters YHWH and erroneously pronounced Yahweh by some, as we shall see soon. It is the most significant name of God used in the Hebrew Bible. The name is derived from the verb that means to be. Now, James White denies this. James White says it doesn't come from to be. And it's like, okay, We'll see, how correct James White is here, but it basically comes from to be, to exist, to cause to become, or to come to pass. It appears in every book of the Old Testament with the exception of Esther, Ecclesiastes, and Song of Solomon. Jehovah is an anglicized pronunciation of the Hebrew Tetragrammaton, Jehovah. So a lot of the time I'll be saying, well, the name's Jehovah, and people are like, oh, duh, it's why, it's a yod. And, you get into these type of debates. And so that's why I put a lot of this information here. I have to sort of go over some basic groundwork so that people understand that, yes, I believe it was pronounced Jehovah, and we just say Jehovah. And so it appears 6,518 times in the traditional Masoretic text, in addition to 305 instances of Jehovah. Primarily, it must be noted that the etymology of Jehovah comes from Hava. Historically, some have claimed that Jehovah comes from, this is a Strong's number, 1943, which is Hova, a ruin, a disaster, but this is false. The etymological link is clearly to Hava, which is Strong's number 1933. And Hova is simply homophonic. So it just sounds like Hova. When people go, oh, well, it's the name Jehovah. It comes from a ruin, a disaster. That's not true. It comes from Hava. So you can clearly see the distinction here from a basic search on just blueletterbible.org. So I've sort of kept the bog standard basics here so people can look it up themselves. The lexical number, 1943, so we have hover, or hover, which would be the correct pronunciation, meaning misfortune, calamity, or adversity. But here we have 1933, hover, which means shall be, may be, or will occur. Jehovah is numbered in many concordances as 3068. The definition of Jehovah lists the word as 1961, haya, to become, which comes from the primitive word from 1933, hover, shall be. And so, James White said it doesn't come from hover. When he did a whole dividing line against what I was saying, he basically just made that statement. And it's just like with James White, he'll just make a statement, he won't back it up, and when you pull him up on it, he'll say, you're a stalker, you're crazy, why do you keep following me around? And what I'm seeing is Stephen Boyce seems to have this same sort of attitude. It's very strange that these modern apologists would dislike people going through their material and correcting where they're wrong. I love people doing that for me. I love critics. I love it when people go, okay, you're wrong here, Nick. You've said this wrong. You've done this wrong. You've got the wrong number here. I'm like, oh, great, I can fix it. Where these guys are like, no, you're crazy. You're obsessed, and all this sort of stuff. It's like, okay, so let's just get down to here. Okay, so if we see Jehovah comes from the meaning Jehovah, the name of the supreme God of the Hebrews, and we see here Haya, which means to be, to become, to exist. So Haya is the one that's related to hover, and that eventually becomes Jehovah. So I just sort of thought I'd clear that up in my book, because some people do go that route and they say, oh, you link it, well, like James White did, you link it to hover, and they say that's a false etymological link. Jehovah clearly comes from hover, which means shall be. And so that's the whole thing. The whole reason I was writing this book was because Revelation 16:5 has which art and wast and shall be. And so the shall be is the word holy is written there in the Greek manuscripts. And so what I was saying was, this is actually an expansion of the name of Jehovah, which means I am. Jehovah actually means I am, or to be, to exist. And so to have the past, the present, and the future, that's just an expansion of the I am, the one who's present now, the one who was and is and shall be. And so it's interesting that Hava, which means shall be, is part of the name of Jehovah. So that's what I was saying. This is the most holiest name of God. In Revelation 16:5, it has the Tetragrammaton there expanded. So that's why they wrote holy there, because it's the sacred name of God. And so we understand in the Old Testament, many times they bring over the name of Jehovah, they bring over the Tetragrammaton, as people like to call it, and many times they wouldn't even translate that. They would just write the holy name, even modern day Jews, they don't pronounce it. They will say Adonai or Hashem, which means the name. So that they're sort of forbidden to say that. And so some people say, oh, they were forbidden in the Old Testament to say that. Well, we're gonna debunk that myth. And so I'll just read through this, because I do say a lot of that in my book, but I tend to shoot from the hip and ad lib. I'll try to limit that. Jehovah clearly comes from hava, which means shall be. Take careful notice with this etymological link. This word in Greek would directly translate as esomenos. That's the exact, which is exactly what Theodore Beza placed in Revelation 16:5, which translates as shall be in English. This is because the word Jehovah means the existing one, who is and was and shall be. The Jehovah Hava link is elementary to Hebrews. For example, the 1814 Elements of Hebrew Grammar below shows us the name of Jehovah stems from Hava. And so, against James White again. So we see this very interesting thing, and I really like this example because it's quite simple and most people can understand it. where if you have the name of Jacob, we see in the name of Jacob we have this word to supplant. But if you put a yod in front of it, it becomes Yaakov. That is a name. So just by putting a yod in front of supplant makes it a name. So we have Yanis Gratios. Sorry, I should have looked up those names, but I don't usually use them, but I'm reading through here. We have to show favor here, but if you put the yod in front of that, it becomes the name. So if we have the word sak here, which means to laugh, we put a yod in front of it, it becomes Isaac. And so if we have to be and to exist here, hava, if we put a yod in front of it, it becomes Yahweh or Jehovah. And so this shows you that Jehovah became a name. And so basically to be or to exist, it depends on whether if God was saying that in the first person, he'd say, I am. So this is something that I've found most Christians don't understand. Most Christians think that the name of I am and the name of Jehovah are separated, and they don't really understand the triadic declaration that's said 5 times in the book of Revelation. And so in my book, I go into all these details. And so, but today I really just want to touch on is the name of God, Jehovah. So sometimes nouns are formed in the same manner. And so that's the 1814 elements of Hebrew grammar. So this person is not a Texas receptors only, TR only person. They're just, trying to create a grammar. They're showing exactly, what the grammatical rules are. And so James White said this was untrue on Twitter. He said it's not related to Hava, but every dictionary I've looked at, every worth its weight, older dictionaries, they're all like, yeah, it's clearly related to Hava. So James White just pulls that out of the air. And sometimes you can spend days and days and days disproving something that James White just says on the fly, and he won't even respond to it. It's just rude. But the example above is revealing that at times yod is prefixed to proper names, such as Hava, to form Jehovah. Notice Hava clearly means to be or to exist. This shows us that Hava has a direct link to esomenos, shall be, to be or not to be. And so it's good to remember that. I usually use that when I'm thinking about the critical text. Usually they follow Vaticanus. Vaticanus is their baby, and so they follow Vaticanus. It was rejected by the Reformers. It was rejected by Mill, 1707. He said it was a back translation of the Latin, as did Erasmus. But to be or not to be, they follow B, which is basically the technical name for Vaticanus. And so you have B and Aleph, you have Vaticanus and Sinaiticus. But in this sense, to be or not to be, that's the name of Jehovah. So if you're trying to remember the name of Jehovah, it's okay, it's related to be or I am. To be or not to be, that is the question. White cannot seem to answer with any factual evidence. So here I have a little screenshot of me as Texas Receptor. So if you're wondering who I am, I'm Nick Sayers. On Twitter, I'm known as Texas Receptors. James White just calls me the TR guy. And so he goes off at Jeff Riddle for calling him a popular internet apologist. He's like, why doesn't he just call me James White? Well, why doesn't he call me by my name? Or half these other guys, So anyway, Texas Receptus, the holy is clearly nomina sacra. Art and wast and shall be is the expansion of the I am and the hover in Jehovah. And so James White, he's responded to this. I have scrolled back to find your comment, as I truly find it impossible to defend the TR reading of Revelation 16:5 consistently. So please prove Ozios is a nomina sacra. There is no hover in Jehovah, which should be pronounced Yahweh. And so he doesn't just pronounce it Yahweh with the American twang. He goes Yahweh. Yahweh. It's like, he's discovered that it's got this breathing thing, Yahweh, sort of thing in it. So that was in 2018. So, it's a little while ago now. And so James White seems to have distanced himself from that topic And Stephen Boyce, who I debated on this topic, he took up the mantle of, I'm going to show Nick says that he's wrong on Revelation 16:5. If you watch the debate, I would encourage you to watch the videos that I've made after the debate, showing that there's probably about 6 or 7 things that Stephen Boyce brings up that are just nothings in the debate, just to sort of win the debate. It's like he'll just bring up some side issue, and it's like, okay, it's not something I disagree with or agree with. It's just this neutral thing. It's like, see, I've won. And I'm later on, I was like, well, you brought this thing up. Why'd you bring it up? Or you brought the wrong list up or whatever. And he's just like, why are you going on about this? You're obsessed. Why are you following me around on the internet? People are laughing at you saying that you're obsessed with me. It's like, no, I wrote a book on this and you're making public claims that I've never made. And so, I can't believe some of these guys, like, I didn't grow up as a Christian, and when I became a Christian, it was very clear that Christians don't lie, Christians don't misrepresent other people, and I've always been really strict on this, because I used to be a liar, I used to be, right into the world, and so, to come across these Christian people who grow up in churches and they're sort of used to the white lies and the grey areas and hiding things from mum and dad and the pastor and all this, and so they just think that other people are going to put up with their rubbish. It's like, I won't put up with their rubbish. I won't put up with the lies of James White or of Stephen Boyce or of anyone else who has a critical text position who will misrepresent what I'm saying. And so I will go to the nth degree to clear my name on that. And so they see that as an obsession. I see it as just a defense of the truth or defending my name. Because if I went out there and said, Stephen Boyce has said this, and so they would go, hey, Nick Sayers is saying all this rubbish about it. But notice they aren't saying those things because I'm not saying rubbish about them. Everything I've said about them is absolutely true. Anyway, that's a side issue. Let's stick to Jehovah. Many modern Hebrews will not even pronounce the Tetragrammaton literally. If you listen to an audio of the Hebrew Bible, you hear the speaker most times will pronounce the term Adonai, where Jehovah is written. But this has not always been the case, and the following evidence shows that the name was well known in Israel and pronounced frequently in the Old and New Testament periods. So there's a guy called Scott Jones, and so he used to have a website up and it's been taken down, or he took it down himself. But Scott Jones, he wrote an excellent article in 2001 that I got onto roughly about 2002, 2003, and it changed my whole view on this issue. So, for roughly 20 years, I believe that the name of Jehovah is the name of God. He wrote an excellent article in 2001 that clarified this concept. In his article, he shows how by examining the names of several Israelites, we learn that the sacred name Jehovah was frequently used in Israel, and also that issues concerning the sacred name have roots even in the biblical record itself. Scott Jones's chart shows how the EH sound, or it's actually, this must be an older form of my book because I was updating this. It's actually, the EH sound. Yeah, no, that's correct. Sorry, this is updated. I'm thinking of the old one. Sorry about that. So the EH sound unique to Jehovah and not Yahweh was modified so that people did not mention the sacred name by accident. So Jones states, Ginsburg goes on to demonstrate from the text and the Masorah that the following names were shortened so as not to accidentally pronounce the Tetragrammaton at the wrong time or the wrong place or by the wrong person. So Jones placed the following chart. My battery is just going a bit flat there, so I'll just quickly... So Jones places the following chart there, which we will look at. That's better. And he shows how this EH concept was taken out of the name. So the JEHO and the JO names are compared. So let's have a look at his chart. And so Jehoahaz became Joahaz. Jehoash became Joash. And so usually people don't understand these things, that in the Bible, in the Hebrew Masoretic text, this is what happened. And so you have some people like, Jehoshaphat, sometimes he's called Josaphat. Well, why is that? That's because in the biblical period, they actually were worried that by saying the name of God in people's names, Jehovah, that they were going to take the name of the Lord in vain. And so I'll touch on that a little bit, so I won't expound on that right here now, but we'll touch on that a little bit later. But it just goes to show you that this is the actual first case for nomina sacra. So the very first case of nomina sacra. So nomina sacra is when you get a name, say the name of Jesus. I'll explain it in English because a lot of people don't know Greek or they don't know Hebrew. And so if you get, say, the name of Jesus, instead of having the whole name written out, you might just have J and S. And a lot of people might say JC for Jesus Christ, and so, and some people see that as blasphemous. Oh, JC, you've condensed the name so much that it's taken the meaning out. Or Christmas, it's Xmas, and they're like, oftentimes just the name of Christ was just the Greek letter key, and so, but this is the first form of that nomina sacra. So it's the first form where you had, Jehoiakim, and it just became Joachim. So the EH sound was taken out so that people didn't say it at the wrong place or at the wrong time. So let's look at a good example here is Jehoshaphat. So you can clearly see where they've moderated and they've amended the Hebrew. And so this is in 2001. So I know that there's a guy called Gordon, I think his name is, and he's brought out a very similar chart, but it's in Hebrew. And people usually just liken it to him. Well, this is written in 2001. This is before all those guys. So I think these guys actually got a lot of this from Jones. But even if they didn't, it was just common knowledge around the Reformation time and up until, the Westcott and Hort mess. And, this was quite common knowledge that the name of Jehovah was related to hover and all these other concepts. So what Jones said, he says, thus it is clear how the ancient Jews viewed the correct pronunciation of the Tetragrammaton. For without exception, the first two syllables in the above names are identical in pronunciation to the traditional pronunciation of the Tetragrammaton. So he's saying Jehovah or Jehoiakim. Well, these in the Hebrew, the letters are identical to the name of God. They've been named after Jehovah. And so it's hard to say that they didn't have the name of Jehovah there when there's people named after him. So many people. Further, the above names, as Ginsburg notes, are all derivatives of the Tetragrammaton, like father, like son. The first two syllables in the names were pronounced the same way the Tetragrammaton was pronounced, which is why the Jews took safeguards to shorten these names. So I'll just put it up there because I can't see if my head is in the way in the little box in the corner. The Jews took safeguards to shorten these names in the first place. Sorry, I've missed a little bit there. So the first two syllables in the names was pronounced the same way the Tetragrammaton was pronounced, which is why the Jews took safeguards to shorten these names in the first place. So the whole reason that the Jews shorten these names of these people was because they were worried about saying the name of Jehovah at the wrong place or at the wrong time, or because it's the holy name of God. And one of the commandments is don't take the name of the Lord, Jehovah, in vain. And so if the Jewish guardians of the Hebrew scriptures did not consider Jehovah to be the correct pronunciation of the ineffable name, then the above exercise in shortening the names would have been superfluous. So he's basically saying, why would they shorten these names? There's no other reason that they would shorten these names except for it has the holy name of God, Jehovah, in it. There's no other reason. So he's got a very good point here. And so I'm just looking for my little mouse here. There we go. Jones then added that noted Hebraist Davidson on the Tetragrammaton, Davidson in the Analytical Hebrew and Chaldee Lexicon, Hendrickson's publishes page 191, where he says the following. And so basically he makes that same argument. And notice he's going Jehovah here. And so I can probably link to that picture. So it's basically just a picture. So I won't read through it, but what I'll do is note the conclusion of Davison. And yeah, or maybe instead of me going through it, you can just pause it there. So I'll just put a nice little shot of it here for you, and you should be able to just pause it there. So this is just a screenshot of what he wrote. And the conclusion of Davison: we could, moreover, not account for the abbreviated forms prefixed to so many proper names unless we consider the vowels of Jehovah original. And so there's no other reason why these names have this Jeho sound in front of it unless that's the name of God. That basically. So I've got a little story here. So when I was preaching in the Philippines at a Bible conference in 2004, a pastor I was preaching for was named Pastor Jesse. So he actually had to change his name because his real name was Pastor Jesus or Jesus. I guess that's probably the Spanish way of saying it. I'm not sure how they say it in the Philippines, but it was basically Pastor Jesus. That's how it was spelled. I would say, hey, Pastor Jesus, which would make for some interesting misunderstandings during worship times. Anyone familiar with Mexico or the Philippines knows that there are many men called Jesus there. For future generations, this in itself is enough to prove and demonstrate that a Christian, or probably most likely Catholic, influence has been on that nation. Likewise, it's also very basic knowledge that because so many people in the Bible were named after Jehovah, obviously the name was frequently known and used by the common people. So, just bringing about basic logic here. Imagine 2,000 years equating that while millions have been called Jesus in Mexico and the Philippines, that no one ever mentioned his name, or the name was actually Yahweh or something like that. That would be absurd. So this is why we know for certain that Jehovah was widely used, and also that the Jehovah, or you have to be specific, Jehovah, you have to continually bring that because people go, oh, it's Jehovah, not Jehovah. It's like, in his name, and it's not Yahweh. It's not the name of Yahweh in the name. It's Jehovah. It has those specific vowels. Hallelujah, for the obvious. And so it's in many words. Even Benjamin Netanyahu's name, so he's the current Prime Minister of Israel, has Yahu or Yahu in it. It's Jehovah. Yahweh in it, Benjamin Netanyahu. It's quite interesting. This is as plain as the noonday sun. If you are open to common sense, it's not Benjamin Netanyahu. For example, Yehonathan means Jehovah has given, where Netanyahu means given of Jehovah. So if you just go through the names of even modern Jews, they're named after Jehovah. But if you just go through the names of people in the Bible, they're named after Jehovah. They're not named after Yahweh. And so this is information that I added because this was quite popular. It was become quite popular. The following chart is from seekingtruth.info and reveals this concept very vividly in Hebrew writings. In Hebrew manuscripts, the Jeho is in each of these names. And so I'll just skip down to that. Okay, so this is the one by, what's his name? I keep forgetting his name. I think it's Gordon or something. But anyway, so yeah, I didn't originally get the info from him. People are like, oh, you're following him and he's off the wall. And so actually, I already had these concepts, but when I was writing the book, it was like, actually, this brings it out very clearly because you avoid the whole, it's not a J letter, it's a Y letter, all this sort of nonsense. It's like a spelling error or something. It's like, why bring it up? Yahweh has, and so they bring out the Yeho in it. And so, but it's interesting, they're not bringing out the contracted form where the EH is taken out because that's also in there as well. But it just goes to show the Yeho is in all these Hebrew names. And so that's why I put it in there. Regardless of who this guy is, I've just put that in as information going, well, that's pretty clear. I actually don't really know much about the guy. He might be a really good guy. He might be a really bad guy. I don't really know. So, but yeah, people, relate me to him. And so I got my ideas from him. Now, clearly, I got it from Scott Jones, 2001. So how did these Yahweh, Jeho get into all those Hebrew names? Perhaps they were named after someone. It's common sense. So if you go to this link here, Seeking Truth, info, blog, Hebrew, theophoric names, and the name of God, you will see that, and it will go to that guy's website. So I'm not sure if he's a Hebrew names guy or just a Jewish guy, whatever, but I agree with his information, regardless of I don't know I don't know if he's a Seventh-day Adventist. I have no idea, but I agree with that information. I don't know anything else about him. So before people start these false accusations and genealogical links for King James only as to Seventh-day Adventists or some sort of weird thing. So James White falsely calls God Yahweh. Yahweh. It's quite interesting. Many scholars would have a squabbling over YHVH or YHWH. Yahweh, 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 Yahweh. I won't go through all them, but you can see these are names that are just all over the place on the internet. And sometimes you'll just jump on a website and they're like, you have to say it this way, Yahweh. Or, it's like, so, people are saying, oh, these are all the true names. But James White, he's got his particular ones, like Yahweh. But White emphatically says that Yahweh. I have found that a presupposition in support of Yahweh hinders many people from correctly understanding the issues around Revelation 16:5. So when I'm talking about Revelation 16:5, I'm like, oh, it's related to the name of Jehovah. It's related to Hubba. People are like, but the name of God is not Jehovah, it's Yahweh. And it's like, this is just like a hindrance to them. And it's like, see, that's why I've had to deal with all this. This should just be common sense to Christians. In the Reformation, this was just common sense. Basically from the Reformation period up until the modern age, it was common sense. But now it's like people, the name of God is this and that. And we're going to prove that the name Yahweh is Jupiter. And so, this is quite amazing. This is why understanding that the correct name of God is Jehovah and not Yahweh is a very important foundation. Many already have cognitive dissonance when it comes to the name of Jehovah being in association with the cult of the Jehovah's Witnesses, and also a name mocked by modern text critics. So we have the Jehovah's Witnesses are like, well, that's the name of God, and they're trying to put it into the New Testament. But then you have other people saying it's Yahweh, and so they're trying to, some Bibles actually get rid of the name Jehovah or Lord, and they basically just, they put in Yahweh there, and so it's like you got these extremes all over the place. But obviously, even just with the information I've just given you, then obviously the name Jehovah, there's a lot of foundation for the name of Jehovah, and so. I've just gone through, maybe, 6 or 7 pages in my book. This is what my whole book's about. It's about the name of Jehovah. It's about Revelation 16:5 and how the name of Jehovah is expanded there. And so I'll just continue through this. I might skip some of this because in books, you have to go in details, and sometimes you have to bring out details just in case people bring a certain type of argument. So I'll skip through this if I feel like just skipping a few bits. It's there for you to read if you want to pause it. While many claim that the name was not spoken frequently, the Bible actually encouraged people to use the name in Israel in Deuteronomy 6:13, 10:20, and it also condemned those who did not use it in Jeremiah. So people are like, oh, you never mentioned the sacred name. It's like, well, how do these people all get named after it? Like imagine, Jehoshaphat, it's like, oh, but you can never mention the name of Jehovah, but that's why they actually changed Jeho to Josaphat. So, it's quite interesting. Superstition and a misinterpretation of the 2 verses in Exodus 20, verse 7 and Leviticus 24, verse 16 has blurred the certainty of frequent uttering. The expression in Exodus 20 verse 7, losor, correctly translated in vain, also carries the meaning of in support of falsehood. So don't take the name of the Lord in vain or in support of falsehood, or you're saying you're a Christian and you're not, sort of thing. So while there have been issues with the pronunciation of the sacred name, which still linger with us today, the name represented by the Tetragrammaton is most certainly Jehovah. Modern text critics cannot refute Jones's article. They simply turn to endless manuscript genealogies and flawed etymologies, which never come to a definitive answer. I challenge James White, Dan Wallace, Bart Ehrman, H.J. de Jong, Jan Kranz, or any other text critic to refute Jones on this article, and no one has. James White's just like, it's not true, it's not related to Harvard. So well, how come all these dictionaries say it? It's like, how come Strong's, even just Strong, he's like, if you are at the level where you're using Strong's, you're probably not a real scholar. What, just because I brought up Strong's? I'm actually dealing with some people who are not up to the level of reading Hebrew or looking at Greek and things like that. And so I'm like, even if you go to a basic thing like Strong, and then he's like, he brought up Strong's, that disqualifies him. It's like, okay. So anyway, as you can see, I've challenged a group of people here. And so agnostic atheist Bart Ehrman summarizes the basic understanding of most textual critics today. So when James White debated Bart Ehrman, basically it was stated that I think it was 8 out of 9 things it was in agreement with Bart Ehrman. So it's like, why are they even having a debate? Well, just because one's like, I'm an atheist, and the other one's like, I believe in God. It's like, well, these guys have, their bibliology is basically identical in most places. And so then, Bart Ehrman's position to someone like me, or someone like, Robert Truelove, or someone like Jeff Riddle, or it's miles apart. But when you look at James White's bibliology, it's miles apart from mine. But when you look at James White and Bart Ehrman, they're not that distant. It's just that Bart Ehrman comes to different conclusions. But he'll still be like, text receptus is ridiculous. And it's interesting. Jehovah's Witnesses agree with these guys. The Muslims agree with these guys. Atheists agree with these guys. And so it's like, James White's sort of like, I've agreed with all these guys, and that's the way that you're going to win a debate, is by agreeing with them. It's like, no. So this is Bart Ehrman. In a lot of Bibles, you may have noticed, or you may not have, that there is a difference in the Old Testament between the word Lord, the first letter capitalized, and the word Lord, all 4 letters capitalized. The first word translates Adonai, and the second word translates to Tetragrammaton, YHWH. That's how, when you're reading a translation, you can tell if a Tetragrammaton is being used. Some translators took the Tetragrammaton with the vowels of Adonai and created an English word for it. In some European languages, the letters Y and J are equivalents. They sound the same as R, W, and V. Think German. If you spell the name YHWH as JHVH and add the vowels of Adonai, you get Jehovah. That's a made-up English word, not a Hebrew word, and not, before this, an English word. People who claim that Jehovah is the divine name are kind of right, but not really. What's that? This is the thing. People will look up to Bart Ehrman, but he's sort of like, he's just got these grey areas. It's like he'll just make up a story, and he gets this from Metzger. Metzger will just make up a story that the scribe was probably using some sort of manuscript that no one else really knew about, and we have no proof existed, and it had all these errors in it, but he was using that, and that's why there's mistakes in Sinaiticus. And so how do you get there, without just this imagination? And so oftentimes it's like they're just vague about things. People who claim that Jehovah is the divine name are kind of right, but not really. What's that? The divine name was probably Yahweh. Technically speaking, the name Jehovah doesn't occur in the Old Testament. Technically speaking, what? This is the guy who they're like, Bart Ehrman is the go-to guru, scholar, text critic. I think on this is retarded. I mean, who would say that the name of Jehovah doesn't, obviously it's Jehovah, but even in the names, it's Jehovah. How can he not see it? How can, the greatest, text critic not see this? And people put Bart Ehrman on a pedestal like he's the guru, to go to. And yes, sure, on these text critical issues, when he's making up these theories about the Q source of Matthew and all this other stuff, it's like, yeah, he's the guru and all that, because all that's just smoke and mirrors and froth and bubble. It's sort of nothing. But when you come down to just concrete things, when I watch his YouTube videos against the King James Version, because I know quite a lot about the King James Version, I'm just there going, how can anyone take this guy seriously? It's ridiculous. What he says is just so dumb and so ridiculous. And, I know people are just lining up to debate him and that they think he's the guru and all the rest of it. Like, just look at what he's saying here. It certainly does not occur. Technically speaking, the name Jehovah does not occur in the Old Testament. And then he's like, okay, and it certainly does not occur in the New Testament, which was not written in Hebrew, so that it never uses the Tetragrammaton. Well, what about the 5 places in the Triadic Declaration? Now, I sent my article to Bart Ehrman to have a read, but he would be like, oh, it's not peer-reviewed. It hasn't been reviewed by Tommy Wasserman and, Jan Kranz and all these other guys, and so it's not really worth looking at. And it's like, because they're in an echo chamber. They're in their own little bubble. Well, Yahweh it's like, if you join their group, it's like Yahweh is the name. If you step outside of that, they're just going to mock you and laugh at you and say, well, what are you, a King James only? What's your problem? Sort of thing. And so they're all of the same cloth, and they won't listen to anything outside of their echo chamber. And so when you just point out, well, what about these names? Where did they come from? What about the expansion of the name of God? What about its relation to hover? What about these things? And so it's just, anyway, these guys make me mad because as so many people revere him as a guru. When the Old Testament came to be translated into Greek, both Yahweh and Adonai were translated by the Greek word kurios, which in English letters is curious. It is the Greek word for Lord. It is a word that can be used to refer to your employer, your master, your superior, so all that's true, or to God, to the personal name of God. So when the New Testament refers to God as Lord, it's not clear if it's calling him by his personal name or if it's designating him as the Lord. But in either case, in my judgment, it does not make sense to translate the term using the made-up English word Jehovah. It's like, it's not just European, it's become an English word. I mean, even if you look at the name Jehovah, it's in Italian, like years and years before English. It's like, if you go through lists of, I've got it actually in my book, I go through lists of where the name come from, and it's in Hebrew. If he would just read the Hebrew without putting this Yahweh word over it and just claiming that the vowels of Adonai are placed there, doesn't the proof that Jehoshaphat, clearly has Jeho in it? How does he get around that? He doesn't explain it. It's just like, oh, they're sort of right, but not really, and all this sort of stuff. And so, anyway, Bart Ehrman is very typical. This is a typical concept among modern text critics, and most would be in agreement with Ehrman here. I don't distinguish much difference between White and Ehrman or even the Jehovah's Witnesses on the issue of textual criticism. They're all on the wrong side of the fence, just at differing degrees of error. Listening to White debate Ehrman is like an Irish Catholic debating a Roman Catholic. They're birds of a feather. especially, we're talking about bibliology. I'm not talking about, him debating whether God's real or all that sort of stuff, because there would be differences. But on bibliology, they're both critical text guys. They both basically follow the Metzger narrative. Metzger, who trained Bart Ehrman, he wrote on the back of James White's King James Only Controversy book, somewhere. He wrote on the back of that and said it's a good book, and so it's the go-to book. So while White simply agrees with Ehrman most of the time concerning which verses need to be deleted from the Textus Receptus, upon examination with the biblical record provided by Scott Jones, we can see these modern textual critics are completely wrong when it comes to the sacred name of Jehovah. James White insistently says Jehovah is a false pronunciation of the Tetragrammaton. So he said, now Jehovah is a false pronunciation of the Hebrew words YH, or Hebrew word YHWH, correctly pronounced Yahweh. This is God's personal name in the Old Testament. And so, I've got that as an AOMIN link down there. So White is completely wrong here. Anyone can easily recognize that the pronunciation for the Tetragrammaton is clearly Jehovah and not Yahweh. Okay, so then I go through a bit of stuff which I might skip, but you can still read it there. You can pause it, you can read it, but I'm thinking about time. So then I go through, maybe I should just read it. The authors of the New Testament, whose words were inspired by God and translated the Hebrew Jehovah as Greek kurios, which means Lord. That is why the King James Version translators translated Jehovah as Lord in capitals. In the Old Testament, one important feature when learning translation methodology is examining how words are carried across or translated from the Old Testament into the New Testament by the original writers. The King James Version translators knew that if God translated the Hebrew Jehovah as the Greek kurios without any issues, then such methods were also safe to replicate into the English tongue. So in other words, the King James has Jehovah is Lord in all capitals, Jehovah is God in all capitals, Adonai is Lord with a capital L, small O-R-D, and Elohim is God with a large G and a small O-D. So hopefully I said all that right. I'm trying to rush, and when I rush, I trip over my words. Sorry if I called the devil Jesus and Jesus the devil. It's my dyslexia. The Greek New Testament writers equated that Jehovah is kurios, and the King James Version translators simply followed suit in the Old Testament, except in 7 places where Yah is used with Jehovah, Jehovah. Thus, they transliterated it Jehovah in English. Yah is simply short for the name Jehovah, as seen in the name Elijah. Elohim is my Jehovah. So how do you get around that? But I understand that could be Yahweh, sort of thing. And that's about as far as people study. It's like, oh, hallelujah. It's got Yah in it. It's Yahweh. And of course, the universal word hallelujah, praise Jehovah, is from hallelu, plural imperative of hallel, to praise. The name Jehovah is first seen in Genesis 2:4 as Lord, all capitals, in the King James Version. And so then I go through John Calvin, and because what I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to build a case that Jehovah is related to the five appearances of the Triadic Declaration, which is who was and is and is to come. That's 4 times, and who was and is and shall be once. And so the shall be one is the purest form of the Triadic Declaration because it shall be. That's part of Jehovah's name. Is to come. It's very close. But so I don't want to really go through and repeat what Calvin's saying here. But if you want to, you can pause it there, read that. So he basically says that the name is I am that I am. They're all related to Hava. So notice that Calvin, according to Calvin, Jehovah is from the future of the verb to be. Hence the meaning of the appellation may be expressed in the words, he who is to be forever. Then he goes on to link the Triadic Declarations of Revelation with the name of Jehovah, Erkomenos. which means is to come. It's closely related to Beza's esomenos, as we shall see later. So then I've got what Bullinger says about it. So I do go through quite a lot of commentaries. So yeah, you can just pause these and read them yourself, because I don't want to read through absolutely everything here. So let's get to the name of Yahweh. Okay, so this is where it gets pretty interesting, because they're accusing us of just being wrong, and they'll make a big fuss about us being wrong, for having the name of Jehovah, which, that's what the Hebrew letters say. There's a bunch of people named after him, in the ancient biblical world, and modern Hebrews, they still name people after Netanyahu. And to fully understand the depth of White's error on this subject, one only has to look at the name he unwittingly utters from his lips when claiming to pronounce the most sacred name of our God. The spelling Yahweh or Yahweh is used in German since the 1950s. The spelling Yahweh is in English, ensuring the pronunciation of the initial consonant as a J, or I guess it's the equivalent of Yod. First appears in the 1860s. Many Christians have been taught by modern text critics that this is a sacred name of God. Dr. Thomas M. Strauss of the Dean Bergman Society has written an informative article on Yahweh. But let me take this information a step further. So Stephen Avery has a forum with a plethora, and so I've written here, I just want to drop this in. So he's got, Stephen Avery's got his forum here. So I wrote disclaimer. Stephen Avery has long been accused of being a modalist. Although he has said that he has attended churches that are Trinitarian and Trinity Light, he says that he cannot agree with some of the creeds because they are not entirely scriptural. He has been banned from some forums due to his ambiguous position, and to the best of my ability, I have, and I'll just jump down to here, I have gleaned the information that is mostly public domain info anyway, but concise on Avery's Pure Bible Forum, which is mostly a KJV defense site. I've also quoted Ehrman, Wikipedia, Wallace, and others I disagree with. If Avery is anti-Trinitarian, I disagree with him. If he is not, then these accusations are slanderous. I should have a gap there. Any quotes from his forum that I have repeated here are mostly linguistic and not theological at all. And so, people are like, oh, you're using Stephen Avery's, but they'll use Bart Ehrman. Full on atheist, full on saying God is evil and all this stuff, And here's Avery. He's like, well, I actually don't agree with the word Trinity. And I can understand. I mean, Paul turned the whole world upside down without ever uttering the word Trinity or the Greek equivalent or the Latin equivalent from his mouth, ever. It's not proven that he ever did. And he turned the world upside down for Jesus. But now we've got to use this word Trinity. And I'm not against using the word Trinity. I actually like the word. I think it's great. I think it sums up 1 John 5:7. There's triad. I'm talking here about the triadic declaration and things like that. And I think that's related to the Trinity as well. But my concept of the triadic declaration is that's the three. It's the past, present, and future. So anyway, where was I? I think I've jumped around a little bit here, but basically I'm just sort of saying that on Stephen Avery's forum, he has a plethora of info about this. And so so obviously the name of Jehovah, I've understood that for like 20 years, but then Stephen Avery's come along with all this information about Yahweh, and I didn't understand this for quite a long time, but then he started saying it, and I was like, this is gold. So which I recommend people to use to further investigate this issue, as I am only going to brief this topic here. So Yahweh is actually the exact ancient pronunciation of the Roman god Jupiter. So just before I go on, I just want to clear up the Stephen Avery issue. So I wrote this book in, I think it got printed in 2019. Since then, I've gotten involved with Stephen Avery quite a lot more. And to me, he doesn't he won't just tick the box and say, yes, I agree with this certain creed and the Athanasian Creed or the Nicene Creed. Yeah, he's like, well, actually, there's 2 or 3 things I disagree with on that. And how do you have everyone being co-equal when you have Jesus, who has actually been born as a human, and he's still human. He still has flesh today. He's still 100% God, 100% human. How does the Father and the Spirit match up to that? How does And so I understand he's got some very good questions on that, and he actually said that I was more of a modalist than him. And so going through this book, I call the Father, Son, the Holy Spirit all Jehovah. And he's so. And when I was discussing this in my forum, a bunch of Reform guys jumped on there and just said that James White is a modalist, and his book about the Trinity promotes modalism. I was like, okay. So you got all these people throwing this stuff at, and there's a guy called Edwards, or Andrew Edwards, I think it is. So I might have got his name wrong, but he's one of the main guys for the 2020 edition of the New American Standard Bible. And so I don't want to lose track here because I've got all these rabbit trails now. But he basically did a debate against Matt Slick about using the term Trinity. He's like, you don't have to use it. And so here you have guys in the critical text camp with basically the same sort of stance as Stephen Avery, but they're not all hounding against him. He's a high-profile guy, having all this influence over one of the most popular Bibles in the English-speaking world. And here Stephen Avery runs, a forum. Hasn't got that, type of publicity, or not everyone using his work and all the rest of it. But they're only attacking the guy who's the King James guy, the Textus Receptus guy. You're not attacking the critical text guy. And so there's this double standard, and you see it all the way through. And this just gets parroted by, James White, Stephen Boyce. It's like, oh, but there's a guy who's a modalist, and they just keep bringing it up because it's just like, as if, it's like with the, like I basically said before, that I got information about the Hebrew names from this guy. I don't really know if he's good or bad or whatever. And so it's like with Stephen Avery. At this point, I was like, look, I'm not sure if he's Trinitarian, and doesn't use the name Trinity. I know some people who do that, and they're thoroughly Trinitarian, but they don't use the name. Some people don't agree with the creeds. I don't agree with the Westminster Confession of Faith. They talk about baptizing babies and stuff like that. I'm not into that. I reckon that's ridiculous and stupid. And it's like, and so, I can't tick those boxes. I think, when you've got the whole Bible and you put it all into this box, you have to tick, 5 things to join our crew. And it's like, well, actually, I don't seem to fit in any crew because, I'm fitting in with the Word of God here. And when I talk to Stephen, if Stephen had never even mentioned anything about, using the Trinity name or anything like that, I wouldn't see any difference between him and any other Trinitarian I know. And so anyway, I just sort of clear that up. So Yahweh is actually the exact pronunciation of the Roman god Jupiter. This is the basic conclusion of even a cursory glance of the issue. So far we have learned we've learned that based upon the Hebrew Bible, that there is no way that Yahweh is a theophoric name in Hebrew, but Jehovah is. Let's examine the claim that Yahweh is Jupiter. Sorry, I'm getting a little bit jumpy there. I apologize for that. Consider these 2 basic points. Yahweh in English is the vocalization equivalent to Yahweh in classical Latin. The classical Yahweh is pronounced Yahweh, E-R-W-E-H, so Yahweh. So the I is pronounced the double E, as in the word sheep, E. The O is pronounced R, as in father, E-R. The V is pronounced W, as in whale, so Yahweh. And the E is pronounced E, as in pet, Yahweh. So this is the classical name for Jupiter, Yahweh. So if we put these sounds together, I won't go through all that embarrassing EAW, stuff again, but it says Yahweh. Put these two sounds together, and it pronounces Yahweh spelled Yahweh in classical Latin, or Yahweh, which is the king of all the Roman gods, Jupiter. The ancient Romans worshipped and praised the name Yahweh. Sounded exactly as White believes the sacred name is pronounced. While similar spelled names in modern English, like jovial or by Jove, we might say, oh, by Jove's, I think he's got it, they can cause one to assume that Yahweh should be Jove and not Yahweh. I'll just skip down. It goes against the classical Latin pronunciation, which can change from culture to culture. Take, for example, the Italian day of the week, Yovedi, which comes from Yahweh Ds, or Day of Yahweh, or aka also known as Jupiter. I'm going to actually just put that, because I can't speak Italian, so I'm going to put that into a translate. So I'm just going to jump up here. I'm going to go to translate. Translate. I prefer Google. Google Translate. Okay, so we'll just actually we'll go to the web so it's a bit better. Tech language, Italian. Let's see what that is.
Giovedì.
So this is the name of Thursday. We'd say Thursday.
Giovedì.
Giovedì. They say Giovedì, or Yahvedi would be the equivalent in the Latin. So they've made it so it's Giovedì. So having the J there, so the Italians have sort of adopted that as well. Anyway, I'll drop that back down. Giovedì. And so, but the difference between a J and a Y, we've seen that all the way through. Yovedi, Yahweh, Yahvedi. So Pitta means father. Jupiter, from Latin, Jupiter, also known as Yahweh, is the sky god and is the god of the sky and thunder, and king of the gods in the ancient Roman religion and mythology. So thus Yahweh and Pitta equals Jupiter. And so you can see that if you just go to Wikipedia, and so the reason I've gone to Wikipedia, people like James White and others, they're like, oh, you're going to Wikipedia, it can't be trusted and all the rest of it. The reason I go to Wikipedia, and I've always, things that I do have an explanation to it. I go to Wikipedia because oftentimes there's ideas there that you won't find in the average online dictionary, or you won't find in the average encyclopedia. People have put their ideas there, and I'll go through and I'll read what they're saying, and oftentimes, it can be biased or whatever, but then you've got a bunch of links down the bottom that can lead on to other things. But then you can go through and look at the edits, and sometimes I've gone through, especially, the studies I've done on Easter and other things, and I'll go through pages and pages of information just looking at the edits, and sometimes one person's just put a paragraph there. I'm like, that's gold, and the next day it's deleted. But it's still there. It's in the history, and you can look through it. And so that's why. And sometimes, too, I also realize that Wikipedia, on some things, it's just a bog standard basic definition. And so what I'm sort of saying is it's just Wikipedia. If you go to the Encyclopedia Britannica, if you go to everything else, it's pretty much going to say the same thing. Because oftentimes, with something like Jupiter, a mythology of Jupiter, they're going to have a basic sort of understanding there. So that's what, and so even in this book I have to explain all that, because these guys will look for dirt anywhere. Like, oh, he's using Wikipedia. He got it from Wikipedia. It's like, no, I'm just trying to show you that it's a standard. Thus, James White calls upon the most sacred name of God with the name undistinguishable from Jupiter and calls him the God of the Bible. So the second line of the Lord's Prayer says, hallowed be thy name, Luke 11:2. We are promised that everyone who calls upon the name of the Lord shall be saved, Romans 10:13. Peter quotes Joel 2:32 in Acts 2:21. In the last days, whosoever calls on the name of the Lord shall be saved. And even look at the Ten Commandments in Exodus 20:7. Thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain, for the Lord will not hold him guiltless that takes the name of the Lord in vain. So I'm just trying to look at that from a funny angle. So now be assured I'm not a sacred names adherent, and anyone who has read my material on Easter knows that I have thoroughly debunked the etymological pagan Ishtar Easter link. And I understand that our society has pagan names for the week and months, and even Thursday, the equivalent of the Latin dies, Joves, via the association Interpretio Germanica of the god Thor with the Roman god of thunder, Yahweh, Jupiter. But White is actually calling upon Jupiter as the biblical God, saying it's the most holy name, and saying Jehovah is a false pronunciation. And so, he would probably do a whole show on saying, Nick Sayer, Stephen Avery, these guys, they say that the name of God is Jehovah, they're idiot, and for no other reason than to just say they're just wrong, and don't follow them and all the rest of it. But I'm saying James White's not only just wrong on this, but he is saying that the name of Jehovah is not the name of God, after all the proof we're given, and which is very clear that it is the name of God. But then he's saying you have to use the name Yahweh. You have to use the name of Jupiter. So when you put it in these other terms, it's like, okay, so don't use the name of the God of the Bible. Please use the name of the God of Jupiter. That's how bad it is. And so, we see Bart Ehrman's jumped in on all that. Most people think that Yahweh is an acceptable name. You cannot drink the cup of the Lord and the cup of devils. You cannot be partakers of the Lord's table and of the table of devils, 1 Corinthians 10:21. So I'm sort of just hammering this home. It's like, look, I understand there's a whole bunch of Christians out there who think the name is just, it's like the Shekinah glory of God. It's not really a name that's in the Bible. And today modern Jews associate the Shekinah glory of God with the male and female part of God. It's like, and I understand people do things from ignorance, and I'm not. What I'm saying is, if you're not ignorant anymore, don't use the name. It's just quite basic. Don't. But if you're doing Bible translations, James White was on the New American Standard Bible translation committee, and so these guys are involved in translation. They're looked up to as the gurus, and they're telling you to use the name of Jupiter. That you have to use this, or you're a dummy. You can't use the name of Jehovah, and so this is problematic for me. While in context, communion is the immediate subject, the verse applies perfectly to knowingly call upon the name of a devil or calling God Jupiter. Remember, no biblical individuals were named after Yahweh. To show you, again, here's the bog standard Wikipedia, and so basically it goes through where the name Yahweh come from. So if I'll go through that so you can just read it, because it goes through a lot of the stuff I've already got there. And you can read those notes. You can pause it, have a look. So I'm sort of giving you this chapter of the book, so you can just look at it. If you want to buy my book, it's in print. I think it's about $15 US. If you go to Amazon and just type in Nick Sayers or type in Theodore Beza, or Revelation 16:5. You'll see that. So when we see, so when we see that the modern concept of the name Yahweh goes back to Genesius, not only did Samuel Tregelles dispel that Yahweh myth, but Gesenius himself thoroughly retracted what he wrote about it. So Gesenius basically said, it's related to the name of Jehovah. So, Yahweh. And so he said it's transliterated as Yahweh. But then later on, he retracted it. And so I've got that information there. So I even go through and show exactly where this is retracted, and in the brackets here, this opinion of Genesius afterwards thoroughly retracted. This opinion Genesius afterwards thoroughly retracted, and so that's in the brackets there. So we can see, I suppose this word to be one of the most I suppose this word to be one of the most remote antiquity, perhaps the name origin as Jovis, Jupiter, and transferred from the Egyptians to the Hebrews. And this is Tregelles here. So Tregelles is looked up to by the guy, Tyndale House. They look up to him. Most textual critics look up to this guy. And he's like, what an idea. God himself revealed this as his own name. The god of Jupiter and the god of the Egyptians. The Israelites could never have received it from the Egyptians. And so this is written, over a century ago. So we've basically tracked down the name of Yahweh to its roots of where this mistake occurred. And this was thoroughly retracted. But people are like, wow, that's a cool idea. Let's just call him Yahweh. Let's just call him Jupiter. It's like, and so I've written it all out in a footnote for people so they can go through. It's easy to read. Okay. Yeah, so it's interesting. Leonard Ravenhill mentioned in a sermon, in 170 BC, there was a man with a strange name of Antiochus Epiphanes. I've probably ruined his name. I used to be able to say it correctly. You need to look up his name and his relatives. He took over Jerusalem. He polluted the temple. He made the Jews sacrifice to idols. He built the statue of Jupiter where the altar of the burnt offering should have been. He burnt the scriptures publicly. He prohibited the name of Jehovah, the worship of Jehovah. So it's quite interesting. Who replaced Jehovah? Jupiter. Isn't that interesting? 170. Isn't this the same spirit? Here we see these gurus, these textual critics are like, they're trying to usurp our Bibles. We have, the King James Bible is the most accurate Bible. It is the Bible. There's no mistakes in it. I will debate anyone on the planet anytime about any reading in the King James Bible. I can't find anyone to debate me anymore. I think they're all chicken. I think these guys are going chicken, and all they can do is just slander you and say, oh, you're desperate and all the rest of it. It's like, well, you guys aren't coming up with good argumentation. And James White, he'll just say something, I'll write a whole book on it. Revelation 16:5, I believe I've thoroughly shown that he not only is wrong there, that he in his book, he knew nothing about Revelation 16:5. He was just making it up. But at the end of the day, he is causing people to call upon the name of Jupiter. So note that Jupiter replaced Jehovah. And worship to Jehovah was forbidden. This issue of replacement will become apparent when we look at the section on this in the commentaries. I talk about, Adam Clark's commentaries, Barnes, and I go through what they say about the triadic declaration, the one who was and is and shall be. But also they talk about Jupiter, and they relate a lot of these things together because they were saying things like the triadic declaration was also used for blasphemy. Jupiter was, Jupiter is, and Jupiter shall be. That's where they got this type of thing. They stole it from the Hebrews, where people were like, oh, they must have stolen it from the pagans around them. No, the pagans around them were stealing the ideas from the Hebrews. While Yahweh, Jehovah, Yahweh do have some phonetic similarities. Obviously, it's Jehovah. Hallelujah. We might go, oh, Yahweh, sort of thing. The bulk of evidence proves Jehovah to be the sacred name. To defiantly say God's name is Yahweh and inserting the exact equivalent of a pagan god in its place is to deny the biblical and linguistic evidence seen above. James White, just get down there, should humble himself and face the facts about the sacred name before calling it a false pronunciation and demonizing those who call upon it. But as we shall see, these elementary issues are just the tip of the iceberg concerning the ignorance of White on this topic. And so then I go through about the Father and the Son, how they're both Jehovah, a whole bunch of scriptures about that. And so you might enjoy my book. I'm not here just to advertise my book, but I will talk about it. And this is, I go through the Hebrew of Elias Hutter and what he says in the 5 places of the triad, the triadic declaration, where Revelation 1:4, 1:8, 4:8, 11:17, 16:5, how it's related to I am, the words, the similarities between what these words mean, I am that I am that I am, and to be and hover, because he uses the word hover here quite a lot. And so hover and haya, which are both related to Jehovah, and so he uses these terms, and so it's quite interesting. What else do I go through? A whole bunch of stuff, and so then I sort of build a case for Jehovah being the name of God, but then I go through the manuscript evidence, and so we can see here, even in this picture here, where they just basically wrote the name out in Hebrew letters, and sometimes that was called Pippi in the Greek, but it was actually the Hebrew letters Jehovah. And so that's the Syriac manuscript that's sideways with it. That's just so we can see the footnote there. So that type of thing was very common. So if you want to look through that. So anyway, I'm going to leave it there, but hopefully that gives you a good understanding of why I believe that Jehovah is the proper name. Now, Stephen Boyce has said that he's read my book, and he said it was really good. He's like, wow, I really like the way that you trace the lineage back to how sacred names started, and then it comes through to today and all the rest of it. But then he was debating me against Revelation 16:5, and so, but he was saying, wow, it's really good. James White says it was really bad. So did Elijah Hickson. So why is there such disagreement with that? Was he just saying it was good just to sort of butter me up for the debate, or does he really think that it was good? What does he believe the name is Yahweh? So I challenge James White, Young, anyone in the critical text camp. Is the name Yahweh or is it Jehovah? And can you disprove what I'm saying? If you can't disprove it, then why aren't you agreeing with it? When you're given new information that you haven't seen before, you can't just dismiss it. You have to make a decision. Some of you guys are just pretending this information doesn't exist. It exists. And either you're calling upon the name of Jupiter or you're calling upon the name of Jesus Christ. Jehovah, Yehoshua, Jehovah with us. He is Emmanuel, God with us. He is our Savior, Jehoshua. Jehovah is salvation. And so either you're calling upon the name of a pagan god and you're demanding that other people do the same, or else they're ignorant Texas receptors, King James only idiots. Who are you going to side with? And so that's the question I'll leave you with. So I'm going to shut this down. So this is my first podcast on YouTube, and so I'm not sure how this has worked, so I'm going to check over it. If it is bad, I might scrap it from the live section and just edit it and cut a few bits out here and there and try to fix it up. But hopefully it's fine, and we can just leave it like that. So yeah, God bless you guys. I'm going to stop streaming now. And how do I do that? I go up here and go end stream. Okay, God bless you guys. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.